Pulitzer Prize-winning historian Doris Kearns Goodwin has made a career out of studying American presidents. She's returning to her favorite subjects in a new book, Leadership in Turbulent Times. It's published by Simon & Schuster, a division of CBS. The book focuses on Abraham Lincoln, Theodore Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and Lyndon B. Johnson. It highlights their efforts to unite the country in tough times. President Johnson tried to do that when he lobbied Congress to pass the Voting Rights Act in 1965.
There is no Southern problem. There is no Northern problem. There is only an American problem.
Doris Kearns Goodwin joins us now. Doris, great to see you.
Thank you.
So I want to start with the quality of empathy. You talk about leadership, but empathy is all through this book. And when we think of leaders, we think of people charging up the hill. Empathy is a softer quality, but a lot of the men in this book had it.
I think it's a central leadership quality. I mean, what it means is being able to understand another person's point of view, to actually feel their circumstances. Several of my guys had it from birth, I think. I call them my guys. I've lived with them for so long. Yeah. I think Lincoln was born with it. Even as a little kid, he hated when his fellow friends would put hot coals on turtles to make them wriggle, and he went and said, "That's wrong, you're causing pain." I think LBJ, in some ways, because he was born in that poverty circumstances, had it. But the other two privileged guys had to develop it over time. And Teddy Roosevelt said when he first went into politics, he went in for an adventure, not to make other people's lives better. But then he saw what it was like in the tenements. He saw child labor. He saw things when he was a police commissioner on the street. And he suddenly decided, if I'm in politics, maybe I can make other people's lives better. I can feel what they're feeling. And self-conscious at first, but then it becomes part of who you are.
And he said it changed his heart.
It did change his heart.
I want to talk about your fireside chats, or your guys' fireside chat, President Roosevelt, because that was a direct connection to the voters, to the people. Do you see any comparison at all between Donald Trump's Twitter account? Is that a direct connection? Can we make a comparison between the two?
Well, it is certainly a direct connection, but the difference is the fireside chats took place over maybe 45 minutes or an hour. They explained problems to the people. He was speaking directly to each individual. It's wonderful. They said Saul Bellow could walk down the street on a hot Chicago night when one of the fireside chats was on the air. He could see everybody looking at their radio in their kitchen or their living room, hear his voice coming out, and keep walking and not miss a word of what he was saying. Everybody was listening. And he was able to make a direct connection to the person in the living room. There's a construction worker who ran home one night. Partner said, "Where are you going?" He said, "My president, he's coming to speak to me in my living room.
But
it's only right I be there."
Makes a direct connection, Doris.
Yes, but what they did was to explain a problem in depth. I mean, for example, when the banking crisis occurred, when FDR first came into office, people had taken their money from the banks. He fixed it so that the currency would be shoring up the weaker banks. He says, "I promise you, it's safer to bring your money back." They open the banks again. They worry, will they take even more out? Satchels come, and they're bringing money back because they trusted him. They acted on his word for something that was going to save the system as a whole.
As opposed to what President Trump, I'm trying to figure out the difference between the two.
Well, I think what the president is doing with his tweets is they come extemporaneously. They're not as prepared. Roosevelt used to spend weeks preparing each one of those fireside chats. He didn't want to say something that would hurt, not the right word. He went over them 5 or 6 times because he knew a president has a dignity, has a moment to speak to the people, and it has to be right.
Well, let me ask you, because it seems that historians have become people's therapists these days, and you constantly get asked, have we seen times like this before where there's so much divisiveness in the country, and sometimes from the president himself? Have we?
Absolutely, we've seen worse terms, and I do feel like history can help us. Just imagine what it was like for Abraham Lincoln. He comes into office, the country is already split in two, more than 600,000 people are about to die. He later said if he'd ever imagined how anxious it would be, he couldn't have thought he lived through it. Even Teddy Roosevelt, when he comes in after the assassination of McKinley, the country is split apart worse than it is now by the Industrial Revolution. The working class feels absolutely split off from the capitalists. There's immigrants coming in from abroad. There's a gap between the rich and the poor. There's a fear that there's going to be a revolution among the working people. And of course, when FDR comes in, the Depression is at its height. You can't get your money out of the banks. There's no jobs. And even JFK coming in, JFK's assassination, bringing LBJ in when they thought of a conspiracy. So we lived through those times before.
It's what called them to their greatness. Doris Kearns Goodwin, thank you so much for being with us. Leadership in Turbulent Times is available now, and it is fantastic.